You're on the phone with the person you love most in this world. Suddenly, you hear them scream. Then, silence. Your heart stops. You drop everything, jump in your car, and race toward them through the darkness. And then you see it. The vehicle speeding past you in the opposite direction. Inside, you hear your loved one screaming your name. You slam on the brakes, throw your truck in reverse, and give chase. You're gaining on them. You're so close you can almost reach out and touch the bumper. Your loved one is right there. Right there. And then, without warning, your transmission fails. Your vehicle stops moving. And you watch helplessly as the truck disappears into the night, taking the person you love with it. Never to be seen again. This isn't a nightmare. This actually happened. And what makes it even more devastating is that we know exactly what the suspect looks like. We know what vehicle he was driving. We have multiple witnesses who saw him. And yet, more than 3 decades later, this case remains unsolved. This is the disappearance of Angela Hammond, a case that has haunted investigators and true crime followers for over 30 years. This is a story that will stay with you long after you finish listening. On April 4, 1991, 20-year-old Angela Hammond was 4 months pregnant and engaged to be married. She had her whole life ahead of her. But on that spring night in Clinton, Missouri, everything changed in an instant. Angela, who went by Angie, was born on February 9, 1971, to parents Marka and Chris. She grew up in Clinton, a small town of about 9,000 people located roughly 75 minutes from Kansas City. Friends and family described Angie as outgoing, popular, stylish, and fiercely independent. After graduating high school, she attended Central Missouri State University, but only stayed for about a year and a half. College wasn't for her, so she made the decision to drop out and pursue a different path. Angie went to work as a night computer operator at Union State Bank in Clinton. In the fall of 1990, she started dating Rob Schaefer, someone who had grown up around her family. Rob was an athlete with plans to join the military. In 1991, Angie discovered she was pregnant, with a due date in September. Rob was thrilled about the pregnancy. He proposed. Angie said yes. By all accounts, the two were deeply in love and excited about building a future together. April 4, 1991, started like any other evening. Angie and Rob attended a barbecue at Angie's mother's house. At the time, Angie was 20 years old and 4 months pregnant with their child. The couple left the gathering around 9 o'clock in the evening. Angie dropped Rob off at his house so he could babysit his younger brother. She told him she'd call in a few hours, and they made plans to meet up once his mother returned home. After dropping Rob off, Angie went to spend time with her best friend, Kyla. Then, at approximately 11:24 that night, Angie found herself alone at a payphone outside the Food Barn store at the intersection of Jefferson and 2nd Street. She was calling Rob from there, just 7 blocks from his home. For reference, there were 2 phone booths at that location. While it was in the middle of town, the area was quiet at night and away from the courthouse square, where most people would be if they were out and about. During their phone conversation, Angie explained to Rob that she was too tired to meet up as originally planned. She said she was going to head home and take a bath instead. But then she mentioned something that caught Rob's attention. She told him there was a green truck that had circled the block several times. Rob asked what the truck looked like. According to reports, Angie said something like, "It looks like your pickup. It's a Ford truck, a little older than yours, kind of greenish color, and it's beat up. It's got a fish and water scene in the back window." At the time, Rob drove a 1973 green Ford pickup, so this description made sense to him. Angie also mentioned that there was no license plate on the front of the vehicle, which was actually required in Missouri. At first, Angie didn't seem overly concerned. But then the truck parked near the phone booth. That's when things took a dark turn. Angie started narrating what was happening in real time. She described the driver as a white man with glasses, black hair, a beard, and possibly a mustache. He was wearing a dark-colored baseball cap and overalls, and he looked dirty. According to Angie, the man got out of his truck, used the phone booth right next to hers, then returned to his vehicle and began shining a flashlight around as if he was searching for something. Rob, sensing Angie's growing unease, suggested she ask the man if he needed to use her phone in case the other one was broken. So Angie did exactly that. The man replied that he didn't need it and said he would try again in a minute. Rob and Angie continued talking about other things. But then, without warning, Rob heard Angie scream. And then he heard that same man's voice say, "I didn't need to use the phone anyway." Can you imagine? Hearing something like that on the other end of the line, knowing you're only 7 blocks away, and completely helpless? But here's the thing. Rob wasn't about to just stay on the phone. Rob later told investigators, "The only thing that went through my mind was getting up there and finding out what was going on. I just dropped the phone and ran out of the house. I didn't even hang it up. I just headed up there." As Rob drove north on 2nd Street toward the pay phones, a pickup truck came speeding past him in the opposite direction. The two vehicles passed each other on 2nd Street, about halfway between Clinton and Ohio Street. And that's when Rob heard it. Angie's voice screaming, "Robbie," from inside the other truck. Think about that for a moment. He was right there, so close he could hear her voice. This is the kind of thing that happens in nightmares, but this was real life. Rob immediately slammed on his brakes and threw his truck into reverse. He backed up onto Clinton Street, spun the vehicle around, and spotted the other truck about 2 or 3 blocks ahead on 2nd Street. He began chasing it at full speed. The truck then turned right onto Calvert Street, which was notable because to leave town, the driver would have needed to turn left. Did this person know the area? Or were they from out of town and just trying to escape as quickly as possible? Rob was frantically trying to keep up, but then disaster struck. His transmission failed, and his vehicle stopped moving forward completely. As it turned out, when Rob threw his truck into reverse at high speed, he damaged the transmission. The force likely snapped some of the teeth on the gears. So when he shifted back into drive, the truck lost traction and became immobile. Rob later described this moment as living through his worst nightmare. He could see the truck ahead of him. He could see Angie. And suddenly, his vehicle just wouldn't move. He jumped out, ran into the middle of 2nd Street, and flagged down a passing car driven by a woman named Dorothy Skinner. He told her what was happening and begged her to chase the truck. Now, some people have criticized Dorothy for what happened next, but let's put ourselves in her shoes for a moment. She didn't know Rob. A stranger just ran into the middle of the road, flagged her down, and told her a wild story about his girlfriend being abducted. She had no way of knowing if he was telling the truth or if this was some kind of trap. Dorothy refused to chase the truck but agreed to take Rob to the police station. And honestly, given the circumstances, that was probably the safest decision she could make in that moment. Once they reached the police station and Rob reported what happened, officers immediately responded to the food barn. They found Angie's Ford Mustang still parked there, facing the double phone booth, exactly where she'd left it. Angie's parents were notified that their daughter had been abducted. Her parents, friends, police, and other residents launched a massive search. They looked everywhere: wells, creeks, country roads, but Angie was nowhere to be found. Clinton police began working the case immediately, focusing on what they believed was their best lead, the pickup truck Angie had described. They called in the Missouri State Highway Patrol, and together they searched for all registered vehicles matching that description. According to reports, they identified approximately 1,600 possible vehicles. But as far as we know, none of them turned out to be a match. And here's the concern: what exactly did this search involve? Was it just running registrations through a database? Or did investigators actually visit each and every one of these registered owners? Who was in charge of tracking these vehicles down? Who was verifying they'd been properly ruled out? With multiple agencies involved, it's very easy for things to slip through the cracks. Maybe some vehicles were missed entirely. Maybe some were checked, but not thoroughly enough. This isn't about blaming law enforcement, but we know from history that there have been cases where investigators had the right vehicle early on and simply didn't see it. 1,600 possible vehicles is a lot. That raises the likelihood that something, or someone, could have been overlooked. With no progress on locating the truck, detectives turned their attention to Rob. At that point, his account of the abduction hadn't been corroborated, and no one else had reported witnessing what happened. Rob underwent a polygraph examination, which indicated he was telling the truth. But even then, investigators weren't fully convinced of his innocence until multiple witnesses came forward saying they had seen the same green truck. One of those witnesses was Dorothy Skinner, the same woman who had driven Rob to the police station the night Angie disappeared. Dorothy told police that before encountering Rob, she had been driving south on 2nd Street toward Hardee's. As she passed the food barn parking lot, she noticed a Ford Mustang parked facing the double phone booth. Near the Mustang, Dorothy also saw a green pickup truck parked at an angle facing it. She noticed damage to the truck's left front fender, and the headlights were on. She wasn't in the area long enough to see anyone in or around either vehicle, but this was critical information. Then two additional witnesses came forward, Michelle and Jennifer, both in their late teens. They told police that on April 2nd, 2 days before Angie was abducted, they were driving on Clinton's Main Street when they pulled up behind a slow-moving older Ford pickup truck with a fish scene painted on the back window. This matched exactly what Angie had described to Rob before she was taken. The women said the truck was traveling at approximately 5 miles per hour. With traffic coming from the opposite direction, they couldn't pass and ended up following the truck for some time, giving them a clear look at it. That earlier encounter is why they recognized the truck again 2 nights later, on April 4th. That evening, Michelle and Jennifer were driving on Jefferson Street toward the food barn. As they approached the parking lot, they saw a young woman standing inside one of the phone booths talking on the phone. At the time, they thought this woman might be someone they knew, so they pulled into the parking lot and drove toward the phone booths. Parked near the phone booth was the Ford Mustang and the same Ford pickup truck they'd seen 2 nights earlier. As they got closer, the women saw a man sitting inside the truck. They could see his thin lips, a baseball cap with collar-length hair curled up beneath it. They also saw the woman in the phone booth. However, as they approached, they realized it wasn't the person they thought it was, so they drove away. Later in the investigation, police asked Rob if Angie had ever mentioned seeing 2 women in a car that night. Rob said he couldn't remember. He told detectives it was possible Angie noticed them, but didn't mention it because she didn't see them as a threat. It was also possible she did mention them, but he simply didn't remember given the stress and chaos of everything that was happening. And honestly, it doesn't matter whether Angie saw these women or reported them to Rob. What matters is that you now have 3 independent parties corroborating Rob's story. Not only that, but they provided detailed descriptions of both the suspect's vehicle and the suspect himself. If you've been following true crime for any length of time, you know that kind of witness testimony is rare. We're lucky if we get a vehicle description at all, let alone multiple witnesses giving similar accounts. This was very good information. So good, in fact, that if you were hearing about this case without knowing whether it had been solved, you would probably assume it had been. The fact that we're discussing it more than 30 years later is genuinely shocking. As the search for the green truck continued, detectives learned about 2 other unsolved crimes within 100 miles of Clinton. The first happened 3 months earlier near Max Creek, Missouri. On January 19, 1991, 42-year-old Trudy Darby was working alone at a convenience store. At some point during her shift, she called her son to report a suspicious man loitering outside. Her son rushed to the store, but when he arrived about 10 minutes later, it was completely deserted. 2 days later, Trudy was found dead on a riverbank about 10 miles from the store. She had been shot twice in the head. About a month later, another woman vanished under eerily similar circumstances. On February 28, 1991, 30-year-old Cheryl and Kenny was reported missing in Nevada, Missouri, roughly 70 miles from where Trudy Darby's body had been found. Cheryl disappeared from a convenience store where she worked and was never seen again. After learning about these cases, Clinton police told the media they believed the cases could be related to Angie's abduction. However, they said that until Angie or Cheryl were found, they wouldn't know for certain. Police in Max Creek in Nevada were less convinced, saying they didn't have clear evidence connecting the cases. And as far as we can tell, Clinton police later appeared to move away from this theory as well. But from an investigative perspective, it's always worth looking at cases with similar patterns. Even if you're at a standstill in your particular case, there may be something in another investigation that's connected. One department might have a piece of the puzzle that doesn't make sense on its own, but when combined with another agency's evidence, suddenly things start clicking into place. There's no downside to reaching out to surrounding agencies and comparing notes. Even if the cases turn out not to be connected, it's still worth the effort. On a positive note, Trudy Darby's case was eventually solved, though the suspect in that case doesn't appear to be connected to Angie's disappearance. However, Cheryl Kenny's case remains unsolved to this day. Then, in 2006, something happened that changed the direction of the investigation. Captain Paul Abbott began working the case and went through the files multiple times. It was on his 3rd or 4th review when he finally noticed a lead that had come up early in the investigation but had apparently been overlooked. According to reports, this lead involved a confidential informant whose daughter was named Angela and bore a similar resemblance to Angela Hammond. She also lived in Clinton. This confidential informant had played a key role in disrupting a large illegal narcotics operation by testifying in court. After the informant's identity was revealed during the proceedings, he received a disturbing letter. The letter was postmarked April 4, 1991, the same day Angie Hammond was abducted. The letter was made up of cut-and-paste letters, similar to what you might see in a ransom note in a movie. It was addressed to the informant by the number assigned to him by detectives to protect his identity prior to testifying. It also mentioned his estranged wife by her first name. These details showed a clear connection to the narcotics case, but it's not exactly a smoking gun. During court proceedings, confidential informants are typically referred to by their assigned numbers. And once the informant's identity was leaked, whether accidentally or intentionally, finding out the first name of his estranged wife wouldn't have been difficult. But the letter didn't stop there. It got much worse. The letter read, "Hello, number redacted. We know who you are. People like you deserve what you get. We know where your foxy daughter is, and she will see us soon. Tell your wife she has our deepest sympathy on her further loss. Goodbye." This wasn't just a threat against the informant. It was a threat against his wife and his daughter. After learning about this letter, detectives spoke with multiple people of interest and potential witnesses. Based on those interviews, they developed a theory. In retaliation for the informant's role in the narcotics case, someone involved in this criminal enterprise planned to kidnap the informant's daughter. However, Angie Hammond was mistakenly abducted instead. Detectives acknowledged the theory sounded far-fetched, but the more they examined it, the more credible it appeared. And to this day, they have not been able to disprove it. For years, law enforcement kept this letter confidential. But then, in late 2020 or early 2021, they received an anonymous voicemail. According to reports, the caller referenced specific details from the letter that had never been released publicly, along with 2 names. But the caller didn't leave any contact information, so investigators had no way to reach back out. In April 2021, on the 30th anniversary of Angie's disappearance, Clinton police released the letter publicly and asked the caller to come forward. They said, "If that person is reading this message, please contact us so we can speak with you in real time. We will protect your identity or assure your anonymity." Police also asked anyone with additional information to come forward, stating they would continue to investigate all leads. Because at this point, they still don't know with certainty whether the letter is connected to Angie's abduction. They're looking for more information. That's what's needed to solve this case, whether it's somehow connected to this drug enterprise, or if it was a random stranger who happened to see Angie at the pay phone at that specific time. Just 1 month after the letter was released, in May 2021, Angie's mother, Marka, passed away without ever learning what happened to her daughter. She was only 66 years old. Unfortunately, there have been no further updates in this case. Angela Hammond is still missing, but police say they remain committed to finding answers and holding whoever is responsible accountable. So where do we go from here? From this perspective, investigators need to start over. Square 1. Gather all the evidence. Digitize anything that hasn't been digitized already. Make sure everyone has access to the same information. Bring together a group of people, some who originally worked the case and some fresh eyes who have never touched it. Treat it like it happened yesterday. Once all that information has been reviewed, maybe something will lead to a new angle that needs to be followed. But just based on what we know, the key to solving this case lies in the description of the vehicle and the person driving it. Whether this was a random stranger passing through town, someone from the community, or someone hired by a criminal enterprise to abduct the wrong person, it doesn't matter. We know with a high degree of certainty that the green Ford pickup truck is involved in whatever happened to Angie. We also have detailed descriptions from multiple witnesses of the suspect driving that truck. That's what needs to be the focus. It's possible that during the initial search of vehicle registrations, investigators didn't pull the right one. It's also possible that somewhere in that pile of 1,600 vehicles, they have the right truck and just missed it. Maybe there was something they didn't connect at the time, but with everything we know now in 2026, reviewing that same information might cause something to click. And let's be honest, it's going to be a daunting task. Not only do investigators need to re-examine those 1,600 vehicles after more than 3 decades, it's time to cast a wider net. Maybe vehicles that were excluded for one reason or another need to be reconsidered. And when we say investigate these vehicles, that doesn't mean sitting behind a desk looking at paperwork. You have to track these people down. Speak to anyone who's still around and try to figure out where they were on April 4th, 1991. In the process, is there anyone connected to these vehicles, whether it's the registered owner, a significant other, or a relative, who matches the description of the suspect? There's a real possibility that when investigators were vetting these vehicles initially, they only looked at registered owners who fit the description. But what if the registered owner wasn't the one driving the truck that day? It could have been a friend. It could have been someone joyriding who the owner didn't even know had taken it. Not likely, but still possible. And if we're not exploring those possibilities, we're creating blind spots in the investigation. But we can't just rely on law enforcement to do everything. Let's be realistic. It's been more than 3 decades. They haven't solved it yet. Maybe they solve it tomorrow, but we can't rely on that. We have to do our part too. That's why cases like this need attention. There may be someone out there right now listening to this who didn't realize at the time that something they saw was valuable. But now, after hearing everything, they understand they might have the key to solving this case. Or maybe there's someone who was afraid of retaliation back then and decided not to come forward. But now, later in life, they've realized they want to do the right thing. Even though it's much later, it's still not too late. On the night of April 4th, 1991, 20-year-old Angela Hammond was abducted from a payphone outside the Food Barn store in Clinton, Missouri, while speaking on the phone with her fiancé. A man driving a green pickup truck with a fish scene painted on the back window approached her. Moments later, she was gone. More than 3 decades later, Angie remains missing. If you have any information about her disappearance, please call the Clinton Police Department at 1-660-888-52679. And to Rob, Angie's fiancé, what you went through is many people's worst nightmare. You're reliving it every single day. But from where we sit, you did everything you could. Your vehicle was the weak link, and that's not your fault. Don't beat yourself up over it. We all know you tried your best. And if Dorothy had known what she knows now, there's no doubt she would have made different choices too. But we can't live in the past because there's nothing we can do to change it. All we can do is move forward. We support you. We're here for you. And we're going to do everything in our power to get the answers you and Angie's family deserve. One day, hopefully soon, we'll have the opportunity to share that the person responsible for whatever happened to Angie has been identified and is being held accountable. Until then, stay safe out there.